Internet, let's talk all about that Punisher One Last Kill special presentation. This is going to be full spoilers for that 50-minute special that I think does something that Marvel has never done with one of their adaptations. I think it's a really comic-y thing, and I'm very curious how this goes over. Please like, subscribe, comment. I'd love to know what you thought of this, and let's get right into it with full spoilers. Punisher One Last Kill does something I think couldn't happen until this point in comic book culture. It is a single issue floppy. This is a go to the comic store on Wednesday and pick up a single comic book size story. We've had trade paperbacks before with movies. We've had sagas that are like an omnibus with like trilogies. We've had things that are a 1-2 punch like Infinity War and Endgame that feels like an omnibus as well. But this is the first time I feel like we've captured the feeling of picking up a single issue of a comic book and telling something that bridges between two things. So not only is this a great use of streaming, much like Werewolf by Night was, giving us something that is very unique and gives us a whole new tone that I really hope they go back to at some point, and the Guardians Christmas special, which is a fun, cheeky solo thing that sets up a very important storyline for Guardians 3. This does something that is also unique in that it gives us a Frank Castle that ties beautifully into the Netflix show with Punisher Season 1 and 2, with Daredevil Season 2, with Born Again Season 1. All of this Punisher lore we have, it brings that Punisher into a setting where we can get more of a vigilante that isn't just someone taking out crime, it's someone that is actively trying to save. We've had Punisher go through similar arcs before, but this is, and I'll talk about that as we talk about the story of this, but this is allowing something to be equal parts single issue and remember why you love this character, and this is the new take on the character that's going to be leading into Spider-Man Brand New Day. Spider-Man is where Punisher got his start. The first ever appearance of Punisher was in Amazing Spider-Man 129. So not only is there a precedent for a PG-13 PG Punisher, but there's even precedent for a G-rated Punisher, because on Spider-Man the Animated Series, there's a Punisher that couldn't even shoot guns. He had to shoot lasers and like toss people because he couldn't throw a punch. Punisher is a versatile character when done right, but you need to got a setup of why this arc goes through. So this entire thing allows for a very The Raid meets side-scroller video game meets zombie apocalypse story that has all the pathos and all of the heart and all of the broken vulnerability that Jon Bernthal's particular take on Punisher brings, but it also goes through an arc that is at times similar to things we've seen before, but landing in a different place where he is now seeking to save people as opposed to that being like a side effect of killing criminals. Now, there have been in even the Jon Bernthal Punishers times where he's felt that kinship to a kid and wants to save them because he couldn't with his own family, but I think this landing of it is very different because the visual of letting Ma Nucci go and then choosing to save instead is choosing not vengeance, but choosing to be a savior, choosing something that he yells at Daredevil for. He is the guy that puts them down so they don't get back up. He let Ma Nucci get away. Ma Nucci is someone that's gonna get back up, figuratively. She kept her limbs in this story. We'll see if that lasts, if there's a season 3. But she is someone that is going to be navigating this, killing him again, and he chose to save instead of that. So I thought this was a very necessary story to set up Brand New Day that also gives us a really beautiful kind of wonder feeling of a single issue for Punisher in this One Last Kill. Also really like the name. I hadn't before. I think it's great that we're asking the conversation of like, how is this his last kill? What does this mean? I think a lot of people that are hating on it are going to be like, well, he doesn't kill anymore, so it was the last kill. But I love the metaphor of the last kill was himself. I love that we had that. We've been reacting over at Real Rejects. Check out our reaction. I had a lot to say over there, but Andrew pointed out like very Martin Riggs energy of like that desperation and sadness of being willing. The one last kill was him. That was the last person to kill on this great vengeance tour, and I love that title. I still would have called it Punisher One Shot because it's more of a comic-y thing to have a one shot, and that's what this actually felt like for sure, but I do think it really works as one last kill being himself. Now the actual structure of this, I also thought was fascinating. In addition to the medium use of streaming, which I think has done more harm than good to entertainment, this is an actual benefit of streaming because in addition to being able to do things like a Werewolf by Night, which is like a beautiful hour that might not have gotten a theatrical release, or something that sets something up with a Christmas special. We're not going to get a Christmas movie most likely. This is a single 40-minute story that bridges stuff, as I've said before, but it does it in a way that tells a different version of Frank's stories in almost like a remember why you love this character thing. It almost is like the most expensive fan film meets Last Time On, but it does new things in that. One, the cinematography I think is the best the Punisher's ever had it. Two, I think his emotionality connected to being a Marine in that format of open this with him flashing back to the trauma. We get that very familiar oh my God, this is this PTSD experience that he's going through in the first act. But what gets crazy for me, formatting wise, is the second act. We get kind of a sister theme in verse to Daredevil Born Again, which we just got. The themes of Daredevil Born Again were redemption and kind of mercy and letting people find their own path and not killing at any cost. Like, Daredevil won't kill Bullseye. He won't kill Kingpin. He will not kill. That is the line he will not cross. And Karen disagrees with it. Now we see what happens when you do kill. That violence begets violence. Even the Nucci's, who were responsible in many storylines for a lot of death, including his family, depending on which storyline you're reading, but the Nucci's are clearly a violent family and a violent people in this very violent town. And to have that all beget more violence, there are people who died because of the actions Frank took. So to have Daredevil Born Again Season 2 to be about mercy and have this to be consequences of violence in the second act of this is a fascinating format choice, because in only 40 minutes we had all the trauma and him not doing his Punisher stuff in the opening, and then we get that shot of him seeing his future self walk in the buses. Then he falls between those buses and becomes the Punisher again. He literally sees a version of himself, but it's surrounded by all of these, ghosts of his past and all these ideas, including Karen, who was wearing the sweatshirt of his ex-wife, his past wife, his deceased wife, and all of these images, not knowing what's real, but then to see Punisher see himself as to what he's going to become, I thought was a really cool choice, because it is continuing in the thing of violence, but it's making the choice to act differently on that violence, and it is something that is following the Born Again choice of no mercy. So seeing where Punisher lands with all of this going into Brand New Day is very interesting. And then after that second act, with a lot of those interesting perspectives of seeing him as like the boogeyman, seeing the Punisher emblazoned on the chest as he takes out all the Nucci's, not having that as the opening, I thought was really interesting. We see the Nucci's already gone and dissolved, and then we see the consequences of it. When we finally see it, we see it as this boogeyman, and then it envelops into what Frank is. And then the third act is obviously, the longest piece of this. The third act is like 25 of the 50 minutes, maybe 30, and it's that insane violence, that raid energy. Reminds me of that one, the Joaquin Phoenix movie from the director of Midsommar, that super intense paranoid. Somebody let me know in the comments what that movie is called. But Joaquin Phoenix, like 4 years ago, that like insane frenetic energy of the film with all the paranoia, but in this almost side-scroller video game setting where it's just action after action. It's the raid in its setting. It's very inventive, different weapons. And I loved how adept Jon Bernthal has gotten with all of his weapons. He's always been incredible, but you really see him with like 24 weapons and him handling them masterfully with great action, with great choreography. There's a couple shots that don't quite land for me. Like there's a CGI shot of him landing on a ventilation thing that looks a little, but the action itself all looks great, because a lot of that was practical, and I love the creativity in it. I love that Disney made a hard R thing. A guy gets fresh ink by getting stabbed to death with a pen covering his tattoos. There's a lot of really inventive stuff that is hardcore R, and I feel like they know that the TV Punisher needs to be R. But I love that we now get the opportunity to have PG-13 Punisher in things like Spider-Man. I don't want to just see him by himself. I don't even want to just see him on Netflix. I'd love to see this character interact with characters that can't have an R rating. And now, because of this little special, we get the versatility of Frank in this new mindset, in being a vigilante, not just a psychopathic murderer that wants to take out criminals, that happens to help other things at times. It's a really interesting medium. It's a really interesting take. It's a really beautifully shot, hyper-violent, fascinating, emotional 50 minutes. But I will also acknowledge it is redundant at times. We have seen this Frank Castle. We have seen him go through PTSD. We have seen him not be Punisher and then decide to take the mantle on again. That's a lot of season 2. We have seen him then regress back to being, I just take out bad guys, Red, in Born Again. So we've had a lot of this. I would love if we get something closer to the Monucci stuff in the comic books. I'd love to see if some of the Garth Ennis stuff exploring people becoming hyper-violent murderers because of him in a season 3, because I think that would mirror the AVTF well. The AVTF being, you appropriated my symbol, that is not what that symbol represents. What if it goes a step further and now people are copycat Punishers, and that's not what, this Punisher believes is justice anymore because of seeing these consequences. So there's a lot more stories to tell. I would love to see more Jon Bernthal, but I think we have definitely tread the I am not Punisher anymore story. The PTSD story can always be a piece of him, but I think we've seen it as the forefront of him in enough adaptations. I'd love to see something different for a season 3, which I hope we get. Very excited to see this brand new take on him in A Brand New Day in Spider-Man, which is coming out July 31st. I overall enjoyed this. My fellow rejects, I was the highest on it. They were a little in the C range. I was in the B range. So I got a lot out of it, but also it was the medium. It was the single issue, and it was also the passion of Jon Bernthal that's been fighting to get this made. You can see why he wanted to make it, and it's beautifully shot. So got a lot out of it. I'd love to know what you got out of it in the comments below. Let me know what you thought of Punisher One Last Kill. Please leave a like in this video. Please subscribe to this channel. I read 50 to 70 comics a week. Every week in a live stream, I break down my favorite 9, hoping you'll get in the comic store, but I also review movies and TV from the lens of a comic book junkie. So if that sounds like your cup of tea, please subscribe to this page, and I will see you very soon for, we got The Boys finale, we got lots of good movies this summer, we got all sorts of stuff, so please join me for all that right here. Appreciate you. Bye.